I think, especially in Nashville, you want to have a good idea. Mm-hmm. You want to be known as the person who had that cool lyric or that thing. Mm-hmm. And to be helpful in a co-write, I've learned sometimes you have to be willing to be the person with the worst idea in the room. Mm-hmm. Just to say it out loud and rule it out as an option. Because if you're trying to help someone else figure out what a lyric is, it's helpful to also figure out what is it not.
Right.
So let's get all of them out of the way.
All right, Wednesday morning, day 3. We're on our way to the house of a musical duo called Wild Harbors. I met them at home in like a house concert at a friend's house. And I was like, hey, we're gonna be near your house in like 2 months. We should chat. And so we're gonna do that. There we are. Let's go. Hello, hello.
Welcome, come on in.
How are ya?
Doing good, how are you?
Good. It's been a long time, you know?
It's awesome.
Hello.
Hi, so good to see you.
Yes, good to see you again. This is Ben. So where do you think would be best to kind of set up and...
Probably either like living room or dining room. We've got the table here.
Yeah.
Said goodbye to house and home. Set off for the great unknown. Didn't we hear that voice that sent our spirits free? Trembling before the choice, but couldn't shake the fear. This is the moment. Everything's clear. Know who we are. Know why we're here before. All we have a fan is caught in the wind. We'll make some monument. Mountain tops echo. I know this won't last long. 'Cause this is the moment. Everything's clear. We know who we are. We know why we're here. Oh, this is the moment. Everything's clear. We know who we are. We know why we're here before all we have. A bed is caught in the way. We'll raise a monument. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, 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 oh.
Wow. Well, thanks, guys.
Totally.
you.
Welcome to For the Record.
Hi.
That was like the best way to start.
Conversations about music, mixing, and the creative industry.
Hey.
Ah, we still got the intro.
There, we still got it. We're just improvising as we go.
I love it.
Well, thank you, first of all, for the musical number.
Oh, totally.
But also just for letting us come into your literal house.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Right.
Welcome to our
That's where I
home.
spend all my time.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Love what you've done with the place.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to take a minute and talk a little bit about who you guys are and what your stuff is.
For sure. So we're Wild Harbors. We're married singer-songwriters who live and work in Nashville, Tennessee. That's a recent change for us. We used to live in Maryland,
Yeah.
Oh,
and
nice.
then got this great idea later 2018. Of like maybe it's time to leave Maryland. So we spent all of 2019 kind of getting our stuff in order, and then we moved here in February of 2020.
Nice.
So you can see
So you're thriving.
Nice
how
time.
that went. Yeah. So that's been a big curveball for us recently. Thinking like, all right, we're gonna, we literally told people at a bank we were gonna pay our mortgage by traveling the country in 2020 and playing music for people. And they believed us.
They had no reason not to at the time, right?
It's
Right?
true.
Right.
Like, sure, sounds good.
Now
Have
it
a house.
It sounds like a weird joke.
Yeah.
But we're still here.
Right.
Yeah. So we're just kind of adapting and, moving forward with the year that it's been since then with
Yeah.
Right.
looking at what does music look like then
Yeah.
in this new scenario.
So what did it look like at first moving here and, making the big move to come to Nashville,
Yeah.
and then 2020 happens and you had to probably improvise at that point.
Yeah.
Like, what was some of the things that you guys did?
Well, some of the like hidden blessing in it. We had so many friends who had planned out these great tours and things for 2020 that went up in smoke. And because of when we moved, we were like, okay, we're going to get there February 1st. So we're going to need like a month or two to kind of get like settled. And then we'll book out the rest of the year. So the saving grace was that we hadn't already booked it of
Right.
like, well, that's okay. So instead we kind of started off on home renovation stuff.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like one of our plans from the get-go was we had friends that had been wanting to move to Nashville, and we'd been in talks with them even before moving to say like, hey, like we're gonna move here in a way that when we get here, we're creating a runway for you to get here too. So in our, like, it seems weird to talk about now because it's like, that's not a normal way to buy a house. But like, we were talking to our friends about qualities of the houses we were looking at to be like, all right, we want something that you guys can like come live in basically.
Right. Not long term,
Yeah.
but like to at
But
least get here.
Long enough to get here.
Yeah.
So one of the big things on our to-do list in 2020 was going to be like, all right, well, we know we want guests. So we need to basically do some renovations to get this space ready for people to come live in. And in my brain, I feel like maybe every artist's brain, like you're always trying to monetize every aspect of your personality or hobbies that you can.
Right.
So it's like, all right, if we're already touring and we're going to be away, doesn't it make sense to monetize that like space somehow? Maybe Airbnb it. I don't know.
Right.
So that was kind of already in our pipeline, I think, as well. But it kind of sped up that whole process
Oh,
for us,
yeah.
where 2020 quickly became like, all right, time to build a bathroom, time to,
Right.
wall out a hallway, time to do all these things that I'd never done before.
Right.
Yeah. I had like grown up watching my dad do a lot of these things and helping,
Right.
you know,
Right.
as much as you can when you're a kid and
Yeah.
you have a dad who just knows what he's doing already. Of like, okay, can you? But like spackling drywall was a thing of like, oh yeah, like I've watched all these things happen and I can figure this out. So I mean, thankfully, my dad like came down a couple of times, like before. Like he came like right before and as COVID was starting. So it was like, okay, let's quickly do a bunch of stuff and then get you home.
Yeah.
And then like doing stuff over the phone of like, hey, so like I think I understand this, but how does that work? So yeah, basically like turning our basement into a short-term rental property on a faster timeline than we thought. But that's turned out to be such a gift because now we thought like after our friends like moved in for a few months and moved out, like we thought, okay, well, it'll become an Airbnb. So we were going through like all the different like check boxes of, you know, learning things like, oh, so you need an egress window for fire. And that's not a thing we've ever like, but I
Right.
bought this pretty bed. Isn't it great? So
But I did the fun part.
right. So like getting all that in order, but then we met this other great singer-songwriter couple, and so they're living down there and have been living there like since January of like,
Yeah.
do you need us to leave? Like, no, you're amazing. You can stay as long as you want.
Yeah, it was kind of perfect.
So-
Turning Point Media down in Franklin, who we'd worked with for our last record, contacted us and said like, hey, we have this couple coming through town. If you want to get coffee with them, like that'd be awesome. If you want to connect, you're both married.
We'll do more than coffee. Come live with
Come
us.
live in our house.
It progressed very quickly. Like by the end of our first conversation, they were like, "Yeah, we're thinking of moving to town." It's like, "Well, we have a spot." Like
Right.
so,
Like,
it's
let us know if you need somewhere.
yeah, they're
So
still
anyway,
here.
yeah. So that's like one big pivot for the year of turning into Chip and Joe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So doing that helped a lot. Like it was kind of like, okay, this would have taken so long if we had still been touring. And obviously we would rather be out playing shows and playing music with people, but like to have that undivided time to actually complete it was really helpful.
Yeah.
So doing that, and then our we don't have like a huge patron tribe, but we have like a small, very loyal patron tribe, and they have totally helped keep us afloat in this past year of like, okay, all of our show income just like disappeared.
Yeah.
So having people who are like, all right, you know, like $5 a month, $20 a month, like we're just supporting your writing process so that we could actually like when 2021 like turned the calendar page and we started like writing a bunch more in earnest, we actually could do that instead of like, well,
Right.
sorry, we
Yeah.
have to go work at Starbucks. Like, you
Totally.
know,
And it's funny because it's like on the one side, like the financial aspect of having patrons has been cool, but I feel like what's been better has just been the social aspect.
Yeah.
Of like, there's a group of people that I've told I'm doing this thing, and you're gonna see something from it.
Right.
And once you open that door for people, I think, for me at least, and the way my artist works, it's like that creates some sort of pressure. Like,
That's
Oh, yeah.
accountability.
it's
yeah.
like, well, you have to
Yeah.
do something. Like,
Yeah, my first band, and I say band loosely, it was me and two buddies, and I really did like all of the work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not to like say like I did it. It was just
Yeah.
like I was really passionate about it, and they were like, "This is fun," and this is
right.
totally.
But,
Totally.
And honestly, I couldn't have done the things that I did without them because it was the realization of we're doing this. I told them we're going to do this, so I'm going to come up with a song and then show
Yep.
them and be like, "What do you think? This could be our next song."
Absolutely.
And like that kind of kept the motivation going.
Yeah.
Shout out the Holiday Boys, Wyatt and Ben. I love you. You're amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
Social accountability is such a huge
Yeah.
factor for me. Where it's like, well, if someone's expecting it,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it's real. Like it's not just a thing you're pretending at in your brain.
Right.
So I think especially after spending so long in like renovation mode, to feel like yes, we have the financial ability to carve out time for writing was great. But also in a world where your entire social circle has been reduced to one or two people, even the idea that someone's out there, I don't know where they are, I can't see them, but someone's out there paying attention,
Right.
responding. That was a motivator. Just like, all right, so sit your butt back down
Right.
and keep doing that thing that you're supposed to be doing.
It's kind of like a step beyond just the fans that you have when you go to shows and stuff, because it's like this person is specifically, consistently, financially invested
Yeah.
in my success, and so
Right.
I want to like move forward and
Totally.
continue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
right.
So what is it?
what has the rest of 2021 looked like as you kind of stepped into doing more shows? Do you guys gig all the time? And also, since I haven't spent much time as a gigging musician, and
Yeah.
especially not in Nashville, like, how does that process look? Do you search out more opportunities, or do you get more people inquiring? How does that work?
Yeah. So the rest of 2021, it hasn't looked like a very tour heavy year for us. When stuff was starting to finally look kind of like the doors might be opening a bit, we were not in the crowd that was like, we're going to charge out and go right away. Like, we were kind of like, okay, cool. Like, it's like hearing your favorite restaurants open again. It's like, all right, well, let some other people go first. And then, like, let me know if it's any good.
Right.
Like-
Like, I don't think I have it in me to be like, sure, and book an entire tour just to have everything shut down again in a month and have it all.
Right.
Like,
Fool me once.
right. Like, no, thank you.
So we wrote a lot instead. Like 2021 was really for us a writing year. Like just getting songs ready for our next project.
Yeah.
And then like we did with the record before, we do get to a point where we say like, all right, we really should play some shows so that you have some real world experience playing these songs in front of people before you've spent the money and the time and the resource to put them on record.
Yeah.
Because maybe you think they're great, but something about being in a live setting and playing them and getting people's reactions, but also just gauging your own reaction as you're playing it tells you a lot
Totally.
about the song.
Yeah.
Of like, is this what I want to be singing for 5 more years? Or is this,
Uh-huh.
do I care that much? Like, and it just helps you weigh those things, I think.
It does. Yeah. So that was August and September for us of like, okay, we're going to like really put a lot of energy into that. And I'm so glad we did. Like, it looked a lot different in some ways. Like, so yeah, like in terms of the, like, are we getting inquiries? Are we putting stuff out there? I think it's different for every single artist,
Yeah.
especially now.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, what are we doing? But yeah, for us, it was thankfully like a mixed bag of both of
Okay.
like people asking and also us putting it out there, working with a couple organizations who are getting off the ground to promote like house concerts. So our August and September shows were almost all house concerts.
Okay.
And it just seemed like a safe way to do music right now.
It kind of ended up being the best fit.
Yeah, like a lot of them were outside, which it's not our typical house concert format, but with COVID, it just made so much sense. Like, okay, well, let's be outside when we can.
Yeah.
It's a smaller group of people, like you're not at risk of having a venue shut down a show and all that kind of stuff. And if you are shutting down a show, nobody's out. You know what I mean? Like there aren't people who are like, well, shoot, now I don't get paid. Like,
Right.
Yeah, so it was a lot of house concerts, which wound up being really sweet because especially in COVID time, like there's so many variables for attendance of like,
That's true.
gosh, like you have a kid come home from school with a fever of like, well, we don't know if he has it or not, but now like we have to be careful and we can't come. Or like we also were in some states, like every state we went to was different. Like some were like, okay, we're going to be so careful. And some were like, I'm sorry, you want me to wear a mask? I'm not coming. Like,
Right.
okay, well, there's that too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's different everywhere. So yeah, it was kind of a sweet way to do that. And a big part of our move to Nashville, which was a thing that I like never thought I would do. Like, like first learning about like Nashville being a music town and everything, it was like, well, why would I live there? Everybody does that. Like they don't need more. Like they're fine. But then we've spent more and more time here over the years of like, oh, okay, all the people we work with now are here and there's such great community here. And also it's in the middle of the country. And we were leaving from the East Coast every time when we wanted to go tour. And we were getting more
That's true.
Midwest shows than we were like exclusively East Coast shows. So, we're like, okay, let's book some stuff in Texas and leave from Maryland and drive like 20 hours. Like, oh, okay, this is kind of hard.
Yeah.
So it has even just like that 2-month preview into like living here and touring from here instead of Maryland was like, oh, this is so great. Like we can go out for a weekend and like hit some of these places and not have to always be planning out like the 2 week
Yeah.
solid thing to like make
Right.
sure it's efficient to get to these spots. Like
That makes sense.
yeah, that helped us a lot. And we still go back to the East Coast and play, but you can do a leg that way or you can do a leg the other way. So that's kind of, you know, we've played some things in Nashville, but I don't think that we expected to be playing tons like actually in the city, more so like working with the people here and then being able to spoke out from here to go play shows.
You don't seem like the kind of band that would be like chilling in a bar on Broadway.
That was my first experience with music in Nashville. It was
bet.
like noon on a Monday and it was raining and we were like this was like before we had done anything musical here at all. And we were just on like a southern road trip with friends and we like go to Broadway before we go anywhere else and walk into this bar at noon. And our friend who's from like Lebanon, the country,
Yeah.
is like, this is amazing. I love it. And this is great. And it's just a girl like playing her guitar like, this is my name. Remember my name. Like strumming her songs to an empty bar except for us at noon. And I was like, I hate this place. Get me out of here. And then learning like, oh, okay. There's more than just that.
Right.
There's way more to the music like scene and it's so healthy and vibrant and fun and
There's
it's
a lot more
not
to Nashville
just
than Broadway.
Yes.
Exactly.
'Cause Broadway is very specific. You
It
know?
is
Yeah.
very specific.
Yeah. So how did you guys get started as musicians, first
Oh,
of all?
man.
And then like tell me a little bit about your story, the progression that made each of you who you are, and now the both of you who you are, you know?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thinking about like where musician life began, I feel like it's supposed to begin when you pick up an instrument and you start like learning it, or like you start learning to sing. And I don't know, it's been interesting for me as you say that, even like I was always an artsy kid. Like I always drew pictures, like I was into filming videos, like just all sorts of writing plays, acting, like all sorts of creative stuff.
Yeah.
And I loved music and I felt like personally I could sing like fine, like not like amazing, but like good enough for me to not be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny because I've always felt like in some way in my brain, it's like, not like I was a musician, but like there was just some hurdle to me being able to participate in it. Like, which is mainly the fact that I don't write songs and I don't play any instrument.
Yeah.
But like everything else about it, it's like I listen to music all the time. I sing. I write songs in my high school notebook that are,
Right.
you know.
You were like an artist,
Yeah,
100% through and through,
totally.
but you felt like you weren't necessarily a musician.
It's just like I didn't have any of the tools to be that one sect of what an artist could be. And so I think learning to play like piano in college was definitely an unlock for me, where it's like, oh, it's like you're just literally like pushing these buttons on this thing and that's what makes chords.
Right.
Like, okay. And it's the same like bum 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 bum
Yeah.
on this as it is on a guitar where you're contorting your hand into this god awful shape to make the same chord.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
something in that for me was like, okay, so
This is the same thing.
if my favorite band can hit that chord and sing whatever comes up on their heads, why can't I do that too?
Yeah.
Like, so there's no special power you need. It's just like, just start doing it. So for me, like, I think probably around 2021, starting to play chords on the piano felt like the beginning of,
Maybe not 2021. Sorry.
sorry, 20 years old, 21 years old,
Oh,
around
gotcha.
that
I thought you meant like
age.
the year. I was like, what?
Around the
Sorry.
ages of 20 and 21.
When I was
You
20
were
or
that-
21.
That many years old.
That- I mean,
Got it.
Sorry.
That was right.
No, I can see how that would be.
I was like, it was a few
There
more
was a
years
moment
ago
I was
than
like,
that.
dang, you became a musician
Just
last
figured
year.
it. Literally, we'd been playing shows so long. I figured I might
Like-
as well start playing an instrument.
Like the idea was
That's how this works.
it was like we moved to Nashville so that we become musicians.
You've heard a lot of
That's how it
musicians
works.
who've moved here. You haven't heard of someone who moved here just to become a musician. It's a long way to go.
So around the ages of 20 or 21.
Sorry, yeah. So around the age of 20 or so, I started figuring out the idea of chords. And for that, for me, it felt like a painter discovering paint. It's like, oh, that's how you do it. I've always known how to draw, but I've never known how to paint. So for me, it was like, I've always had words or ideas or whatever.
Yeah.
But learning how to just make chords on something felt like the first time I was like, all right, well, now I can put them together to make 4 minutes of something.
Yeah.
However good or bad it is, I don't care. Like, it's
Right.
just beginning.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
What about for you, Jenna? What's your origin story?
I was like just always singing from the get-go. Like I remember, it's funny, you have like flashes in your brain looking back of like all the little snapshots or like the highlight reel or whatever of, I remember being 4 and going to work with my mom. I was an only child at that point. And like I would have like my Fisher Price Little People and stuff to just like play in the back while she was like doing her thing, and I'd be like making up musicals. Like that's just what they did, and that's just what I did.
Yeah.
So it never felt like this, you know, like, well, when did you start to sing? Like I just always did. It just came very naturally. But yeah, like I always did that. Always loved music. You know, played clarinet in school, like had piano lessons from my grandpa for a very brief amount of time, but he was a very stern German man. And so that didn't last too long. I was like, I want him to be my grandpa again, not my piano teacher.
Yep.
So like, yeah, I remember being in like late middle school, like the summer after 8th grade into 9th grade, of like discovering some new like bands and things, and had gone to this summer camp and was like, whoa, there's this whole other world of music, and finding some of those like female singer-songwriters and being like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I didn't know this was a thing. Like, because all I'd been listening to was pop radio. So I'm like, I've got my Ace of Base CD, I've got my Spice Girls CD, I'm good. Like, and discovering all of that was so like life-changing. And I think it's been really interesting for me these past few years to kind of reflect back, because when I dig down to high school Jenna, like there was no doubt in my mind that I could do that. And I would write songs and they were exactly what you would expect a teenage girl to write in her notebook. Like there was nothing landmark going on whatsoever. They were basically like, I heard this pop song on the radio and I'm going to rewrite the words.
Right. Yeah.
And it does barely even change the melody. Like that's kind of what was going on. But just did it all the time, and always had people like, thankfully I had friends who played guitar or piano. Like I didn't really delve into the instrumental side of things. And then it's been interesting to see how like at some point, and I've like dug into a lot of this with like counseling and different things, but like at some point after graduating from college, and like we played music together in college, like that's, you know, like we were friends hanging out in college before we were ever like dating or married, and like would play with our friends. They would play for us because we didn't still really know how to play instruments, of like, sure, we'll sing the songs and you play them and that sounds great.
Yeah.
And like at some point through different things that happened, it kind of became this like, how do I say it? This thing that I still like loved to do, but somehow the idea that it had ever been a possibility for me to do that like for a living got this curtain drawn, and it was like it never existed. Like not a like, well, I can't do that anymore, but just like, nope, like gone.
That's not an option.
Hello. Yeah. So it's been really, I have a bunny at my foot.
Come out to visit.
Hey, girl.
Hey guys, I just wanted to remind you, please like and subscribe. It helps us a ton. And there you go.
Yeah. So like, it took a long time. Like I had all of this music in me, and I had been in like musical theater for years. Like just had all of this time singing in me and things. But it took a long time, like throughout our marriage, of like Chris having to sometimes slowly just like, you know, like there's a lot of things you're good at. Like I was a teacher for 11 years in a public school, and he's like, you know, you're a very good teacher. You're very good at all these things, but I think you could be really great at this. And like, I don't want to see you lose out on the thing you could be great at because you're kind of hiding in things that you know you can do that you're good at. And it has taken a lot of unraveling and vulnerability to like get to the roots of all of that. And like, oh, like I did know how to dream. Like at some point I knew how to like have dreams that weren't guaranteed, you know, instead of just like, well, I don't know how that would even work. I don't understand how that line of work works. So it's just like not even a place I'm willing to go.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful that we are where we are now. And it's funny, like if you know, like just some of the like shows that we've gotten to play or people that we've gotten to work with and things, like if you told high school Jenna that happened, like she would be in shock of like, I don't think she would have like assumed that it was actually like possible, but also it would totally have been in line with like the things that she loved.
Yeah.
And if you told 10 years ago Jenna what she was doing, she would not believe you because it would be so far removed from like any possible life plan of like, what are you talking about? That's not what I do. That's not like my life. So I don't know. It's just been an interesting journey into like learning how to admit that I want things.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So both of y'all become established musicians, and then at some point paths cross and you're like, let's do this together.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Sure. Yeah, so I feel like Jenna hinted at it. Like, we've been playing music together before even I feel like we had artistic identities as musicians. Like, our first gigs were just on our college campus, just doing, like, covers gigs things, like, for, like, campus events. And it got to the point that we did those long enough that, you know, the people who were playing music in the group said, well, I'm going to go do this real thing. Like, you guys can keep doing that if you want, but, like, I have other stuff to tend to.
Yeah.
And so it gets to the point that, like, we'd already had a gig booked, and we, like, looked at each other like, we're the only two people on this gig. Like, everyone else is, like, doing something. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so it was, like, literally the first time that the two of us stood on stage, just us, and, like, I think just, like, played Ring Around the Rosie at a keyboard. Like, playing, like...
It's the only thing we could both sort of play.
Right. It's like, we can kind of play this and do our, like, Counting Crows cover or something to, like... how are we going to fill 20 minutes of this?
Right.
Like, so that felt like kind of maybe a point where we kind of had to look at each other in some regard and say, like, if we're going to keep doing this, we can't keep relying on other people to show up and playing our instruments for us.
Yeah.
Like, there needs to be some faculty that we're taking now to take ownership of whatever this is going to look like if we want to keep doing this thing.
Yeah.
And, like, after college, we just, you know, went from college campus gigs to, like, coffee shop gigs to stuff like that. And slowly started to get a little bit better about playing our instruments or working in songs that we'd written versus cover songs.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe initially it's like 10 covers and 1 original.
Right.
And then next year it's like 3 originals and 7 covers. Like, it just starts shifting.
Yeah.
And as we just kept doing that, it's like, we have a lot of songs we've written at this point. Like, and you start doing enough of those gigs and people start saying stuff to you like, do you have a record? And you're like, well, no, I guess we should make one. Like, everything felt just stumbled into it as a result of, like, well, I guess that's the next logical thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, we're already playing these shows around town, singing these songs we've written. Why shouldn't we have a record that people can listen to them when they're not here?
And at this point, it was very much like, by songs we've written, Chris would write songs, and I would write songs. And it would be like, okay, well, we'll play the one that you wrote that's about this, and then we'll play the one that I wrote. Like, there wasn't any kind of collaboration happening at that point.
Yeah.
Other than just figuring out how do we sing them together. Like, I wrote a song, so you should sing on it too, you know?
Yeah.
So that kind of came later. Like, we made our first record together, like with a college student at another university. And And it was like, okay, this is a collaboration of Chris's songs and Jenna's songs. I guess the band will be called Chris and Jenna. Like,
Yeah.
and just here they all are as we're kind of like stumbling along, figuring out how to do this.
Yeah.
Was it challenging trying to like co-write? Because I know for me, when I was first, like, I've written some songs, and I felt like stepping into the space of doing it with other people was tricky.
It's become like anything. I think it's become easier the more we've done it.
Yeah.
Especially the more we've done it with kind and gracious and patient people. Like you can throw anyone into that mix and have a really bad experience. It's fortunate that the process of our art has looked like taking those two Venn diagrams of like Chris's songs and Jenna's songs and trying to push them into one circle to say like, I don't want this overall effect to always feel like, well, she's gonna sing a song and I'm gonna sing a song. Like, we want it to feel like now that we're this band, like you're hearing a song the artist wrote. And with co-writing for some of the songs that we did on that record with like our producer, like we'd show him the song we wrote and he'd say, well, what do you think of this? And sometimes he'd have a great idea. And sometimes he'd have like a laughably bad idea. And I go, no, not that at all. But it taught me a lot because I think, especially in Nashville, you want to have a good idea. You want to be known as the person who had that cool lyric or that thing. And to be helpful in a co-write, I've learned sometimes you have to be willing to be the person with the worst idea in the room. Just to say it out loud and rule it out as an option. Because if you're trying to help someone else figure out what a lyric is, it's helpful to also figure out what is it not.
Right.
So let's get all of them out of the way.
Right. And it's really just, sometimes it's just like throwing things out there, and a good idea oftentimes is really just what's stumbled upon.
Yeah.
Right?
So if I'm just crumpling up paper balls and throwing them at you, like, what about this lyric? What about this lyric? Your brain just starts going, no, not that. But eventually something in them, you go, oh, but wait. And you start it's response.
Yeah.
As opposed to just stagnation.
And it's also like, then you feel more confident about what you chose because you chose it. It's not like if you only had this lyric ever, there's kind of this seed in your mind of like, was there something better? And it's like, no, we worked for like, this is on purpose. This is intentional.
Totally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think like, you know, the initial process of that was just us, because we lived in a town where like we had a few other friends who like wrote songs and did things, but not many. So it's the two of us kind of figuring this out together. And like for me at first, it was songs were so personal. Like this was like my diary pages being poured out. So for you to then sit here and be like, well, I don't know about that line. It was like, how dare you?
Right.
Of this inability for me to think about like it being anything different. Of like, but that's what it is. That's what I wrote. Like, how could it change?
Right.
And like learning how to like move on from it being only personal self-expression to like moving into the craft of songwriting. Like, okay, well, sure, that's what your diary page like poured out, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that. Like you can craft a better song with this other person in the room, and it doesn't mean that they're attacking the core of who you are.
Right.
And that took a lot of learning for us of how to like broach that kindly to each other, of how to do it in ways that didn't just feel like we were ripping each other's songs apart, like how to fight for the best song and not just like
when it becomes about a song and not a person, it's a different conversation. Actually, I feel like the best way I learned that was not from a music podcast, but a comedy podcast. It was Dimitri Martin talking about like a stand-up special he'd filmed for Netflix or something, and he's in the editing room at this studio going through the footage, and Jon Stewart from The Daily Show was in there with him, and he's saying to Jon, like, I don't know about the way I'm doing this. I don't like the way I did this, and when it goes to this shot, I kind of do this. And Jon Stewart stops him and goes, I'm going to stop you right there. You need to realize that's not you. And for him, it was like this separation then between the content he had created as a creator and who the person sitting in the chair was. Says, you're not on screen. You're sitting here in a chair. Something you did and we recorded is on a screen now. And that's not who you are.
okay.
And so for me, it was like, okay, if I make up a lyric or if I write Born to Run or whatever it is, it came out of something I did, but I don't have to treat it the same way I would treat my heart or anything like that. It's not that precious anymore. Like, it is in some ways, but
Yeah.
in some ways it's also not me. Like,
It's interesting the way that people write songs for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and like for instance, like the songs that you wrote originally were deep and personal, and so there's a space where like every lyric that's in here is coming from a truthful place of who I am.
Yes.
And like that, there is nothing wrong with that. Like that is really cool.
No.
But it's cool being like that is a space for songwriting, and then there's another space where it's like let's create something that tells a story or that moves in a direction but isn't necessarily pulling from, like, we're creating content.
Yeah.
We're not like spilling our soul, but we can use what we've learned and what we're passionate about to like bring life to that story.
totally.
Yeah.
It's cool, like the different spaces that songwriting can fill and can occupy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really two skills. It's like it's hard to create a song out of nothing and say, like, here's all my raw emotions, here's all my personal feelings. And then to look at that song and say, like, all right, that's beautiful. What do we want to use? What do we want to do with this song? Is it just a song you want to sing for yourself in your room?
Yeah.
That's great if it is. Is it a song you want to put on this record or something, or play in front of these people? And if that's the case, if we're trying to communicate to something to people with it, what are the ways we can edit it? What are the ways we can play with it and shape it to be succinct or more clear, or little things like that, like where you can put on that different hat to be like, all right, well, if that's what we're going to do, then like let's fine tune it like we would fine tune anything.
Yeah. So most of your guys' songs then that you guys do as Wild Harbors, are they, what kind of space do they typically fill? What's kind of like your goal in the songwriting approach
Yeah.
for those?
Gosh, yeah. So we have a big wall right now just of little seeds, because it's been a year of like just catching up with ideas that aren't fully formed yet.
Yeah.
So normally for us, it starts with like one of us will bring an idea to the table, it feels like, and say like, hey, here's kind of just the gist of it. It's a song about, what if this happened? And then maybe there's a chorus attached to it. Maybe there's a verse. Sometimes it's just as vague as an idea. And then we'll kind of put our heads together for an hour or two at a time, and just start trying to flesh it out a bit.
Yeah, I think as we've written and kind of like evolved into Wild Harbors, it's been a realization of like, okay, the songs that we're creating that feel the most like true to sing and that resonate with people are ones that are like fostering connection and encouragement for people, and trying to be just really honest. And sometimes that's being honest about like digging into relationships of like, hey, so relationships aren't always like easy. And so let's sing about that, about how like it's worth it to press into hard things. Or about like, I think this whole journey of like becoming the band Wild Harbors like involved us leaving behind other jobs and like taking a lot of chances and things. And I think us realizing the importance of how everybody is born with things that they love to do, and that's on purpose.
Yeah.
And we're meant to do those things. Sometimes as a full-time job, sometimes not. Like it doesn't always have to look like that.
Yeah.
But us realizing that like that's not a thing that you just put away as you like get older. Like you're supposed to really lean into the things that you love to do when you're younger. And
Yeah.
we've been so encouraged to see other people like resonate with that message of like, wow, like we're seeing what you guys are doing, and I'm thinking about how much like I have always deeply loved baking and just felt like, well, what could that matter? Like, or I have always loved, this or that. And it does matter. Like, it's not just okay, you can bake something for somebody one time. Like, that can make a big difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
And I think, I think, like, the space of Wild Harbors, like, when we're crafting songs and thinking about, like, well, what kind of space does this fill? And, like, why? Like, those are a lot of the things bubbling to the surface.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like I feel like that more than a musical vibe or anything else is kind of what we use as the rule of thumb to define, like, what is a Wild Harbors song? Like, does that song speak to the possibility of connection? Does it speak to people who might feel alone? Like, is it something that brings people together? And that's kind of for us, like, where we start saying, like, all right, is it the sad breakup song we wrote? And that's cool or whatever, like, from whenever. Like, that's probably not one of those songs that we're going to be using for that project. But we're looking for songs that I think are meeting specific criteria in that world, too.
Yeah.
That's cool. So the name Wild Harbors.
Yeah.
What's the story?
Right. Well, we told you we played as a Chris and Jenna for a while, at just necessity. Literally, we had a record to make and didn't have anything to put on the cover.
Yeah.
I said, my name is Chris and your name is Jenna.
The end.
There it is.
I mean,
that was easy.
A lot of people run without their whole life, and it works great. So.
Yeah, works great.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until we started doing our last record here in Nashville that we started getting questions. You know, if you get a question from one person, you're like, oh, interesting. They thought to ask us that. If you get a question from 5 people,
you're like,
you start going like, why is everyone noticing? So a question we got a lot was like, so the band name Chris and Jenna, what does that? How did you guys land on that? What does that mean to you? Why that? I don't know.
And it felt like just being like, well, just kind of cause.
Right.
Yeah.
Just felt like it wasn't enough.
Totally. It's like you realize it feels like you've been driving with like a fake driver's license forever. It's like, I don't know, it just worked and no one pulled me over yet.
Right.
So for us, it was like, maybe there's a thought behind this that we haven't given it. So
that's cool. Cause if you guys were writing songs and it was the like personal songs, like the breakup songs, like this is, instead of trying to create content, you're trying to basically like bare your soul.
Yeah.
If that was the vibe and the direction you're going, you could say like, we felt like the way we could honestly be truest to ourselves was to just keep our name in the title.
Totally.
That was it.
And that's a reason. Right?
Yes.
Like, and so in
It
that
is a
case, people would
reason.
be like, oh, that's great. I love that.
And what I would have told you in 2010 was I'd just watched like a VH1 Behind the Music or something with Goo Goo Dolls. And Johnny Resnick was like, I hate the band name Goo Goo Dolls. Like, I can't believe we picked it and now we're stuck with it and I have to play under Goo Goo Dolls the rest of my life.
Right.
And I was on this like, I was like, that's it. We're not picking some dumb band name just to, you know, it's just going to be our names. Because I'm never going to be sad about my name. Like, let's just make it that. And so it was almost a refusal to participate in the study of it or the creativeness of it.
Yeah.
So never mind, just me, my name. Like, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah. But
And,
when we were making this past record, it was kind of like we were noticing that it was a departure in a lot of ways from those like just intensely personal things. Like it was more co-written than it had ever been. So it had a different sound than anything we'd ever done because we had collaborated on all these songs and all our influences had like meshed to form something new.
Yeah.
And it was then also on the heels of like me leaving my job and different things. And it was like, if there was a time, this is kind of the time. And our producer being like, yeah, I mean, you guys like have this gift of where you haven't even really made a ton of first impressions yet with what you've been doing. So this is kind of the perfect time to like rebrand. And if you're going to do that, like this would be it. So it felt really like timely. And in terms of the band name itself, we were literally writing down words on pieces of paper and pulling 2 at a time out of a hat. Like,
We'd have like games in the car. It's like, all right, I'm going to say a word on 3, you say a word on 3. And then whatever we say, like, that's the band name. Like 1, 2, 3, werewolf.
Ninja.
Right. Like, all right, we'll scratch that one. That's not going to work.
Definitely different.
Yeah.
Werewolf Ninja.
Yes,
So,
great band name.
Still available if anyone wants it.
Yeah, that's yours.
But yeah, we'd just have hundreds of them, and we'd start saying them, and like, well, does this sound dumb? Does this sound dumb? We had so many dumb sounding band names.
Oh, yeah.
And Wild Harbors came pretty late in the game, and I think our producer's response was like, yeah, I'd wear that on a t-shirt. That sounds fine. Like, he's, this idea of like, it kind of matters, but it also kind of doesn't.
Right.
Like, it just needs to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or as we were thinking of it, I said, like, if this is a restaurant, what is the name on the restaurant that gives you an idea of what kind of food they're serving?
Sure. Okay.
Because, as we were told, like, Chris and Jenna, when I hear that, I think maybe it's like a guy and a girl and she's playing a glockenspiel. And it's kind of cute love songs maybe or something.
And it was like that at one point.
At some point maybe it was, but that was not the record we were making.
No.
So for us it was a matter of like, well, what name can we put on this to best give people an idea of like, what's the kind of music they're going to hear when they open this thing up? Like,
Yeah.
so
So it had a lot of cool, like, as we bounced things out to our circles of people, we liked a lot of the insights that people had when they heard that one of just like, you know, wild things are not tamed. And we were in a season of like, we don't know what's happening. This is all uncharted territory. And a harbor is a place that you can leave from or come back to. And yeah, like there was just a lot there. Like, we don't need it to concretely mean this one
Yeah.
thing. But this is conjuring a lot of images that feel true.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for me, it was less important that it means something out of the gate. Like, what does Coldplay mean?
Right.
Coldplay.
I wonder if Coldplay knows what Coldplay means.
Right.
I know,
But
right?
it starts to mean something once you have an attachment to what that artist does. So you develop a meaning from your experience.
right.
So I felt like Wild Harbors had a lot of capacity for me to find meaning in
Yeah.
that I felt attracted to.
So that name then is pretty new in your guys'
In our world, yeah.
world. Yeah.
That launched what, beginning of 2019? Is that right? 2018?
We changed
2018.
the name in the beginning of 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is relatively newer because we had recorded that fall before in 2017. So
And you don't hate it yet.
No.
I've stopped thinking about it, which is the
Yes.
best part.
Nice.
Yes.
After,
Yeah.
you make a record and you think the work is done, and then you say, well, now for 3 more months, I got to figure out what to call this thing. Those were the worst months.
Right.
Because I don't know, it feels so overwhelming and important. And, ultimately, the big thing is you can just be done with it and move on with your life and keep going. And
Right.
sometimes you think of it and you go, oh, yeah, that sounds fine.
It also really helped with like being married and moving into working on this band full time instead of just like, nights and weekends and things like that, to be able to create some separation of like, okay, we are working for Wild Harbors.
Yeah.
And then when the workday is done, now we're Chris and Jenna.
Totally.
Like now we
Yeah.
can just be our married selves and like be able to actually like take the hat off instead of perpetually like not knowing like, we're always working or that type of thing. Like that's really helped
That's
us.
that double-edged sword again. Like, if you're playing in a band called Chris and Jenna, you are Chris. And if you book a gig and just Chris shows up or something, where's Jenna?
Right.
You're told something right out of the gate from that band name.
Yeah.
But with Wild Harbors, I can say, hi, my name's Chris. I sing and play guitar in Wild Harbors. And when I go home at night and I change into my pajamas and I put on a movie, I'm not in Wild Harbors anymore. I'm off. Like,
Right.
so it's a nice, healthy separation for me between what I'm doing
Yep.
professionally and creatively and who I am.
Yeah. And some people have their own.
Yeah.
There's a million people whose artist name is their real name. Like John
Right.
Mayer is John
Right.
Mayer, and they handle that like so beautifully. But I'm sure it's always like a thing for people. So it
is
just helped
interesting.
us.
Yeah, it is interesting how different and real that is. I feel like work-life balance has been something
Yeah.
we've talked about on several of the episodes of this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Because like that's a real thing in the mental game of how do I hang up this hat and actually be
Right.
myself or figure out who I am and contribute that to my creative work, but also like maintain the integrity of who I really am outside of that.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's weirdly really hard. That's a
Right.
big thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially when maybe you're married to the person that's also in the band with you.
Right.
I think it can be especially hard, especially with like social media, like to say like, who am I what I'm told from all these people? Like,
yeah.
if you start to believe some of that, you start to believe your own hype. Like, there's all sorts of ways like that.
Yeah.
That separation between presentation mode and
Yeah.
personal mode, the lines just get so blurred.
What have been some of the blessings and hard things about you guys working together, like all of your life together kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the blessings are like that. I mean, of course, it's a blessing that we still get to do what we're doing right now. Like, especially after the year that was 2020. Like, I think we're very fortunate that we're still in a place that it works for us to be able to do this, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
With being married, I think we probably both always have a long game in mind where it's like, all right, we're doing this now. There might come a day that we're not doing this. That will be okay. And what is neat about it is that I think we probably always have one eye towards those hidden skills where it's like, we're building a lot in doing this, that's gonna transfer over. If it's credits in a college, like they're all gonna transfer to the next thing in a way that feels really beautiful. Like we're writing songs together, so we are making melodies and lyrics and content and all this. But sometimes it's a bad song. And on those days, what you're really taking with you is, well, we learned how to communicate better through doing that. I learned how to listen to you and really hear what you were trying to say. And even though the song sucked or whatever, like they're not all going to be great, like we're going to carry that part with us, certainly into the next song, but also into the time of life where maybe we don't need to do that. Like maybe we need to listen to each other for more important reasons.
Right.
Like, I don't know. That's what's neat about, I think, having that connection.
Oh man, that communication piece has been huge. Like we don't have the option to just like come home from work and like each do our own thing and go to bed and then go off to work and like wake up 5 years down the road of like, who are you anymore? Like we have to communicate all the time. And so we have to fight. We have to like get into all the like, what is wrong with you? How does your brain work so differently than mine? And like, it has just forced us to do that. And that has like yielded such good fruit in our work, but in our marriage as well. And I feel like they've kind of fed each other in really helpful ways. And I think like, man, one huge perk is that, I mean, we were friends long before we ever dated. So we have liked hanging out together for a long time. And I'm so grateful all the time, like whatever season we're in, of just like, you're in the car with me when we're on the road. Like one of us is not saying goodbye to the other one of like, all right, go play your shows. I'll be here. Like there are so many couples who weather that so well. And I'm really grateful that we don't have to, that we get to do it together. And who knows? I mean, there might be a season in the future where we need to, but yeah, I'm really grateful that we get the opportunity to hang out together and do it together. So, and still get, our alone time, because too much of a good thing is still too much. So, so there's totally days where it's like, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And I will like you again in 5 minutes. But right now, I need to be away from you.
That was definitely a conversation in buying the house. It's like, there's only one room in this house. I'm going to need at least 2. So I can go be alone at some point.
I know. Oh, man.
But yeah.
Man, so what's in the future for you guys? I mean, partly who knows, right?
Right.
But if like dreams, hopes, visions, if Wild Harbors could go somewhere, or if Chris and Jenna could go somewhere,
Sure.
What would that be?
Yeah. Chris and Jenna will be staying home for the next few, like probably starting December. We're going to be hunkering down for a bit with baby number 1 on the way.
Right.
So that's expected January 1st. So
That's a big deal.
once we get off the tour we're on right now, we're going to be probably laying pretty low. So settling down for a bit and just
Learning how to be parents.
Right.
That is a big next thing.
Speaking of hard division, like,
boy.
turning off some of what we're doing and just separating for a little bit, just to say like, all right, time to like just be at home.
Yeah.
And then I think professionally, like next year will probably be some recording time for Wild Harbors. Like now that we have these songs that we've been working on in 2021, getting to the point that we're saying like, all right, like, is it an album? Is it, some singles? I don't know exactly how the format's going to release.
Yeah.
But I think 2022 is going to be the year that we start getting some of that stuff out there. So
Yeah.
that'll be nice too, with being at home a bit. Like
Right.
now that we're at home, we're in Nashville. So it's like, all right, well, we can easily pop over to a studio and do some of that work while we're here too.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. And then learning how to tour with a baby.
Yeah.
Right.
That'll
Yeah.
be
That'll
the
be a
next
whole thing.
adventure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
And it's so encouraging being in, I think when we lived somewhere where we were some of the only people doing what we did, it was so hard for me to envision how can this work. But now we live here and there are people who do it all the time. And is it hard? Yes. But everybody figures it out.
And you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Like, okay, well, if y'all figured it out, we can figure it out and we can all support each other. Like being able to have like touring mom friends that I could text of like, hey, so what do I need to register for because we're going to be on the road with this baby? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
that is gold. It is
Yeah.
gold to have other people who are like, even if you, because of your like work schedules and life schedules, you don't get to see each other tons, but you know that you're there for each other of like, I've got you. And when you don't know what to do with a toddler on the road, like we can talk about it, you know?
Yeah, that's cool.
Even the
So-
fact that like that's a normalized thing here.
I know.
Versus like maybe where we were coming from, like so much of the culture was like, what? It's good that you guys are doing what you're doing, you know, before you have any kids. Like,
Right. While you're young.
Right.
while you're young.
Right.
You're so young.
Okay, but what if we want to keep doing it?
Right.
Is that
Like
allowed?
that subtext and all of that. Versus here, it's like, oh, cool, having a kid. Yeah.
And that's something I feel like is really encouraging. Like in one culture, you could feel like there's zero affirmation in what you're doing because people just don't get it.
No.
Right.
And not bad on them. It's just so
No.
different.
Yeah, it's just outside of their box.
Right. And so then being in a spot where you're surrounded by people that get it because that's what they're walking through too.
Yeah.
You can get like encouragement, support, advice, counsel.
gosh,
and even
yes.
just the knowledge that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just
it's
feeling like
huge.
you're part of a group that's a normal thing for.
Yeah.
And to have that reflected back to you, like, yeah, of course you're doing that. Like,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Like, that affects a lot.
That camaraderie is really important.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you guys.
Thank
that sounds
you.
like a
Yeah.
heck of a fun season that you're walking into.
Yeah,
We're
it'll
gonna
be an
see.
adventure for
Yeah.
sure.
It'll be brand new for us.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking.
Absolutely.
This has
appreciate
been
it.
so fun. Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Thanks
oh,
for
absolutely.
coming to
Yeah.
our home.
Yeah.
Yay.
And man, I don't even know. I'll see you sometime. I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
I hope
Next
so.
time we're in Nashville.
I would love
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Sounds
and,
good.
Yeah, we'll see you next episode.
Love it.
Bye.
Bye.
And so I started with them from before show one because I, recorded the tuba for the VeggieTales theme song and I recorded that first polka. They said, okay, with this theme song and we want it to be a polka. I'm like, perfect.
Which is funny because I've never directly thought about the VeggieTales theme song being a polka until this moment, but I'm like, I mean, that's 100% what it is.